I walked into my parents' dining room expecting the usual cold shoulder, but I wasn't prepared to find my chair missing entirely. My father laughed, pointing to the empty space. "No seat for disappointments," he announced. I stood there, humiliated, thinking it was just another cruel joke about my life choices. I didn't realize then that the missing chair wasn't about petty grievances. It was the first move in a calculated plan to frame me for a crime I didn't commit. The highway leading north toward Alder Cove was a gray ribbon stretching out under a sky that looked like a bruised peach. It was late November in North Lake State. The kind of cold that didn't just sit on your skin but tried to work its way into your bones. I had the heater in my sedan cranked up to the highest setting, but my hands were still freezing on the steering wheel. I told myself it was just the weather. I lied to myself. It was the house. It was always the house. I was 33 years old. I had a job I was proud of, an apartment in the city that I paid for myself, and a life that felt, on most days, manageable and calm. But every mile closer to my parents' driveway peeled away a layer of that adulthood until I felt like an exposed nerve ending. "Don't cry." I said it aloud to the empty car. "Don't cry. Do not let them see you cry." It was my annual Thanksgiving mantra, for as long as I could remember. My role in the Mitchell family had been the sensitive one. It was a label my father applied with a heavy, patronizing hand, usually right after he said something designed to cut. If I reacted, I was hysterical. If I defended myself, I was dramatic. If I withdrew, I was moody. The only winning move was to be a statue, impervious and smiling, no matter what sharp little stones they threw. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My eyeliner was sharp. My lipstick was a bold, deep red, a color I wore like armor. I looked put together. I looked successful. I looked like someone who could handle a weekend with the people who were supposed to love her unconditionally, but usually settled for loving her conditionally. Based on her utility, I turned off the main road and onto the winding drive that led to their house. It was a beautiful place. I had to give them that. A sprawling, two-story colonial with white siding and black shutters, sitting on 2 acres of manicured lawn that my father obsessed over. Smoke was already curling from the chimney. It looked like a greeting card. It looked like the American dream wrapped in a bow. I parked behind my brother Mason's pristine SUV. Of course he was already here. Mason, the golden boy, the one who could do no wrong, the one who learned early that if you just nodded and smiled, you got everything you wanted. I took a deep breath, inhaling the smell of damp leaves and wood smoke, and grabbed the pumpkin pie from the passenger seat. In my purse, I had a small, expensive candle for my mother, jasmine and sandalwood. Her favorite, a peace offering. I was always bringing peace offerings to a war I hadn't started. The front door was unlocked. I let myself in, bracing for the noise, but the house was strangely quiet. "Hello?" I called out. In the dining room, my mother's voice floated back. She sounded distracted, high-pitched. I walked through the foyer, my heels clicking on the hardwood. The smell of sage and roasting turkey hit me, a scent that should have been comforting but instead made my stomach turn over. I walked into the dining room and stopped dead. The table was set. It was magnificent. Really, my mother had outdone herself. The good china with the gold rim was out. The crystal goblets sparkled under the chandelier. There were fresh flowers in the center, an elaborate arrangement of autumn mums and dried wheat. And there were chairs, but there was something wrong with the math. I counted. 1 at the head for Dad, 1 at the foot for Mom, 1 on the side for Mason, 1 next to Mason, and then nothing. There was a gap, a physical, undeniable gap on the side of the table where I had sat for every Thanksgiving dinner since I was big enough to hold a fork. The table setting was missing. The chair was missing. It was just a stretch of white tablecloth, smooth and empty. "Hi, sweetie," my mother said. Bustling in from the kitchen, she didn't look at me. She was wiping her hands on a dish towel, her eyes fixed firmly on the floral centerpiece. "You made good time." "Mom," I said, gesturing to the table with my free hand, "where is my seat?" Before she could answer, my father walked in from the living room. He was wearing his favorite cashmere sweater, holding a glass of scotch, looking every inch the patriarch. He stopped, looked at me, and then looked at the table. He didn't look confused. He looked amused. He made a show of counting the seats, pointing a finger at each one. 1, 2, 3, 4. Well, he said, his voice booming in the quiet room. No seat for disappointments. He laughed, a short bark of a laugh, as if he had just delivered a witty punchline at a dinner party. I stood frozen, the pumpkin pie heavy in my hands. The air left my lungs. I waited for the follow-up. I waited for him to say, "Just kidding. Brooklyn, we're bringing in the folding chair." Or, "We're moving the table." "I'm sorry?" I asked, my voice steady despite the sudden pounding in my ears. "It's a reset," my father said, taking a sip of his drink. "Your mother and I decided we need a reset this year. Less drama, better energy." "Drama?" I repeated. I just walked in the door. "And look at you," he said, shaking his head with a pitying smile. "Already tense, shoulders up to your ears. We just want a nice, peaceful dinner. Brooklyn, is that too much to ask?" My mother finally looked up, but she looked through me, not at me. "Here, give me that pie," she said, taking it from my numbness hands. "And take off your coat. I need you to peel the potatoes. The peeler is on the counter." She turned her back and marched into the kitchen. I stood there for another 10 seconds, processing the humiliation. No seat for disappointments. He had said it so casually. He had planned it. They had discussed it. They had set the table, looked at the gap, and decided that the visual representation of my exclusion was better than my actual presence. I walked over to the coat rack in the corner of the room, behind the heavy drapes, and there it was. My chair. It had been shoved into the corner, half hidden behind my father's trench coat and Mason's heavy wool peacoat. It looked like discarded furniture at a garage sale. It was an afterthought, a piece of junk storage. I felt a sting of tears, hot and immediate, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. "Do not cry." I reached for the chair. I was going to drag it to the table. I was going to force my way back into the picture because I was their daughter and I deserved a seat at the table. "I wouldn't do that," a voice said softly. I turned. Mason was standing in the doorway between the dining room and the living room. He looked handsome, successful, and perfectly calm. He held a bottle of beer loosely in one hand. They moved my chair. "Mason," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper. "Did you see this?" Mason took a step closer, lowering his voice. "Look, Brooklyn, don't make this a thing, okay? Just don't." "I'm not making it a thing," I hissed. "They removed my place setting. Dad called me a disappointment to my face within 30 seconds of me walking in the door." "They're stressed," Mason said, dismissing my reality with a wave of his beer bottle. "Dad's been on edge about work. Mom is, you know how she gets about the holidays. Just roll with it. Please? For me?" "For you?" I looked at him. "Why is this for you?" "Because I have a guest coming," he said, "and I don't want her walking into a war zone." The doorbell rang. Mason's face lit up with a smile that looked practiced, a sudden switch from annoyance to charm. He turned on his heel and went to the front door. I stayed by the coat rack, my hand still gripping the cold wood of my exiled chair. I heard the door open. I heard enthusiastic greetings. I heard my mother's high, performative laughter, the sound she made when she was trying to impress someone. Mason returned to the dining room, leading a woman by the hand. She was petite, with blonde hair curled into perfect waves and a sweater dress that looked very expensive. She looked like she belonged in a catalog. "Everyone," Mason announced. "This is Lydia." My father stepped forward, beaming. "Lydia." "Welcome, welcome. We've heard so much about you." "Thank you for having me," Lydia said. Her voice was soft, polite. She looked nervous, but she held herself with a certain poise. "Practically family already," my mother said, emerging from the kitchen with a tray of appetizers. "Come, sit, sit. You must be exhausted from the drive." And then, with a sinking horror, I watched as my mother guided Lydia to the table. She pulled out the chair next to Mason. My chair, or the chair that should have been mine, the spot where I had sat for 3 decades. "Right here, dear," my mother cooed. Lydia hesitated. She looked at the table, then at the empty space where I was standing near the wall. She looked confused. "Oh, I don't want to take anyone's seat." "Nonsense," my father said loudly. "That is your seat. Brooklyn is fine. Brooklyn is just getting settled." He looked at me then, a challenge in his eyes. "Make a scene." His eyes said, "Go ahead. Prove me right. Show this new girl that you're the crazy one." I looked at Lydia. She was smiling, but it was a tight, confused smile. She sat down. I let go of my chair in the corner. I wasn't going to drag it out. I wasn't going to scrape the wood across the floor and make a sound that stopped conversation. I wasn't going to give them the satisfaction of seeing me fight for scraps. I walked over to the buffet table against the far wall, picked up a spare dining chair that was usually used for holding decorative pillows, and carried it to the very end of the table, the foot, opposite my mother, but squeezed into the corner so I wasn't technically at the head. It was the children's spot, the outcast spot. "I'll just sit here," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. "Perfect," my father said. Turning his back on me to pour Lydia a drink, I sat down. I folded my hands in my lap, beneath the tablecloth. My fingers were trembling so hard I had to lace them together to stop it. They were rewriting reality. They were editing me out of the family portrait in real time. And if I screamed, I was the one who ruined Thanksgiving. "So, Lydia," my father said, his voice dripping with charm, "Mason tells us you're in marketing. Fascinating field." I tuned them out. I looked at the tablecloth. I looked at the silverware. I felt a cold, hard knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just meanness. My parents could be mean. Yes, they could be critical, but this was theatrical. This was staged. You don't print a seating chart for 5 people unless you are trying to send a message. "Brooklyn?" I looked up. My mother was standing over me. "The potatoes aren't going to peel themselves." I stood up without a word. I walked into the kitchen. The kitchen was a chaotic contrast to the pristine dining room. Pots were boiling. The oven was humming, and every surface was covered in flour or vegetable peels. It was hot. I went to the sink and started peeling. My mother bustled around me, humming a tune I didn't recognize. She was manic, her movements jerky and fast. She was avoiding me. She was wiping counters that were already clean. She was rearranging spice jars. My father came in a moment later, carrying empty appetizer plates. "They like the shrimp," he said. "Good, good," my mother said. She leaned in close to him, near the hallway entrance where they thought the running water masked their voices. I turned the faucet off to rinse a potato. "Don't mention the letter," my mother hissed. "Not tonight. Frank, we agreed." My father's back stiffened. "I know the plan. Martha, I just want to make sure she knows her place." "Just keep it light," she whispered. "We need to get through the weekend." "What letter?" I asked. I hadn't meant to say it. It just slipped out. They both spun around. My mother looked like a deer in headlights. My father's face went from startled to angry in a split second. "Gravy," my mother blurted out. "The ladle for the gravy. We need to find the silver ladle. Brooklyn, stop spying on people and find the ladle." "I wasn't spying," I said, putting the potato down. "I was standing right here. You said something about a letter." "You're hearing things," my father said dismissively. "Always imagining slights. Always the victim. It's exhausting. Brooklyn." "I heard you say letter," I insisted. "I said better." My mother lied, her voice rising in pitch. "I said, don't mention it better not be tonight, about the weather turning, for the drive home. God, Brooklyn, why do you have to pick apart every sentence?" They were gaslighting me. It was so clumsy, so obvious, that it felt insulting to my intelligence. But the wall was up. They had closed ranks. "Find the ladle," my father commanded, and walked back out to the guests. My mother busied herself with the turkey. Her back strictly turned to me. I dried my hands. "I'll check the other room," I said. I walked out of the kitchen, but I didn't go to the dining room. I went down the hallway toward the home office. Usually, the door to the office was wide open. My father liked to show off his mahogany desk and his shelves of leather-bound books that he never read. He liked people to see him as the master of his domain. The door was shut. I tried the handle. Locked. That was new. In 33 years, I had never known that door to be locked. We didn't have secrets in this house. Or rather, we had secrets that everyone knew but no one spoke about. We didn't have physical barriers. I stared at the brass knob. Why lock the office? What was in there that couldn't be seen by a daughter who had been uninvited from the table? I heard footsteps approaching from the dining room. I quickly stepped away from the door and opened the closet next to it, pretending to rummage for the serving spoon. "Found it yet?" Mason asked, walking past. "Looking," I said. He didn't stop. He went into the powder room and shut the door. I looked at the trash can in the hallway. It was a small, decorative wicker basket, usually empty. Today, it had a layer of tissues on top, but underneath, I crouched down. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I moved a crumpled tissue aside. There was shredded paper, not just torn, but cross-cut shredded, but a few pieces had escaped the machine's teeth. Or maybe the machine had jammed. There was a strip of paper, creamy and thick. I picked it out. It was a fragment of a logo, a stylized eagle wing, and below it, in red, bold font, the words, "Now notice, final notice." I stared at the scrap of paper. My parents were wealthy, or they projected wealth. They belonged to the country club. They drove new cars every 2 years. They went to Europe in the fall. People like Frank and Martha Mitchell didn't get final notices, unless they did. I shoved the scrap of paper into my jeans pocket just as the powder room door opened. I stood up quickly, grabbing a random spoon from the closet shelf. "Found it," I said to Mason as he emerged. He didn't even look at me. Great. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced smiles and the metallic taste of adrenaline. I ate on the corner of the table. I passed the rolls. I listened to Lydia talk about her job in the city, and I watched my parents fawn over her as if she were the daughter they had always wanted. The one who didn't ask questions. The one who wasn't difficult. I felt like a ghost haunting my own life. By 10 o'clock, I claimed a migraine. It wasn't a lie. My head was throbbing with a pressure that felt like a vice. "Go lay down," my mother said, waving a hand. She didn't offer aspirin. She didn't offer tea. She looked relieved. I went up the stairs to my childhood bedroom. It was exactly as I had left it at 18, and yet it felt sterile. The posters were gone. The books were boxed up in the closet. The bedspread was a generic floral pattern that I had never chosen. It was a guest room now, devoid of my personality. I closed the door and leaned against it. Exhaling a breath I felt like I'd been holding since I crossed the county line. Don't mention the letter. No seat for disappointments. Final notice. I changed into my pajamas, my movements slow and heavy. I went to put my phone on the nightstand, but the charger cord slipped down behind the heavy oak dresser, the one piece of furniture that had actually been mine growing up. I knelt down to retrieve it. I had to pull the bottom drawer out slightly to reach the cord. The drawer stuck. It always stuck. You had to jiggle it to the left. I jiggled it. The drawer popped out further than I intended, coming off its track on one side. I groaned, reaching in to fix the track. My hand brushed against something taped to the back of the drawer panel. I froze. It was an old hiding spot. When I was 16, I used to tape cigarettes and notes from my boyfriend there. My parents never found them, but I hadn't taped anything there in 15 years. I reached in and peeled the tape loose. It held a white business envelope. I sat back on my heels, holding the envelope in the dim light of the bedside lamp. It was addressed to me, Ms. Brooklyn Mitchell. But the address wasn't my apartment in the city. It was here, 142 Oak Lane, Alder Cove. I frowned. I had forwarded my mail years ago. I never used this address for anything. The return address was from a company called Sterling Hart Financial Services. I had never heard of them. My hands were shaking again. I slid my finger under the flap. It was already open, or rather, it had been steamed open and resealed. The glue was tacky and uneven. I pulled out the letter. Dear Miss Guy, Mitchell. This letter serves as a notification regarding the status of the Mitchell family legacy account ending in 4920. As per our previous communication, the unauthorized overdraft. I stopped reading. The words swam before my eyes. Mitchell family legacy account. I didn't have a legacy account. I banked with a national chain. My savings were meager, but mine. I had never opened an account with Sterling Hart. I looked at the date. It was from 3 weeks ago. I scanned down the page. Outstanding balance of $12,400. Immediate action required. Potential legal ramifications. My stomach dropped so hard I felt nauseous. $12,000. In an account I didn't know existed. Tied to my name. Sent to my parents' house. My first instinct was to storm downstairs. I wanted to march into the living room, slam the paper on the coffee table, and scream until the windows rattled. I wanted to demand answers. I wanted to know why my name was on a debt I hadn't incurred. I stood up, gripping the paper. I took 2 steps toward the door, and then I stopped. I remembered the dining room. I remembered the reset. I remembered Mason blocking me. Don't make this a thing. If I went down there now, waving a piece of paper, what would happen? They would deny it. They would say I was confused. They would say it was junk mail. They would say I was hysterical, invading their privacy, snooping in drawers. They would turn it around on me. They always did. They would exhaust me with circular arguments until I was crying and apologizing for being upset. And the truth would be buried under the avalanche of my emotional instability. No. I took a deep breath. I forced my heart rate to slow down. I wasn't going to play their game this time. I wasn't going to be the reactive, sensitive daughter. I walked back to the bed. I picked up my phone. I turned on the camera. I took a picture of the envelope. I took a picture of the letter, making sure the text was legible. I took a picture of the return address. Then, carefully, I folded the letter back along its original creases. I put it back in the envelope. I reached behind the drawer and taped it back exactly where I had found it. I fixed the drawer track and slid it shut. I stood up and looked around the room. It felt different now. It wasn't just a cold house anymore. It was a crime scene. They were hiding something massive, and they had taken my seat away not because they were disappointed in me, but because they needed me to be the enemy. They needed me to be the scapegoat. I lay down on the bed and pulled the covers up to my chin. I stared at the ceiling shadows. Okay, I whispered to the darkness. You want to play? I wouldn't scream. I wouldn't cry. I would gather every single receipt, every scrap of paper, every whispered conversation. I closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I began to plan. The morning light in Alder Cove was deceptive. It filtered through the high windows of the kitchen with a soft, buttery glow that made the stainless steel appliances gleam and the granite countertops look like they belonged in a lifestyle magazine spread. If you were looking through the window from the outside, you would see a perfect family tableau. Mother at the stove, father with his coffee, son leaning casually against the island, and daughter slicing fruit. You wouldn't hear the silence, though. You wouldn't feel the tension that was pulled so tight it hummed like a high-voltage wire. My mother, Martha, was conducting the morning like a symphony of passive aggression. She moved with frantic, sharp bursts of energy, slamming cabinet doors just a fraction harder than necessary. Thin slices. Brooklyn, she snapped without looking at me. I said thin. We aren't feeding livestock. These are for the fruit platter. I looked down at the cantaloupe I was cutting. The slices were perfectly uniform, translucent at the edges. They are thin. Mom. They look chunky, she countered, flipping a pancake with a violent flick of her wrist. Mason, honey, do you want blueberries in yours? Or just plain? Her voice shifted octaves when she addressed my brother. It went from the sharp bark of a drill sergeant to the cooing of a dove. Plain is fine, Ma, Mason said. He was scrolling through his phone, looking unbothered, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. Don't go to any trouble. It's no trouble for you, she said, casting a sideways glance at me. My father, Frank, was sitting at the breakfast nook, the local paper spread out before him. He took a loud slurp of his coffee. So, he said, lowering the paper just enough to peer at me over his reading glasses. How is the gig work going? Still doing that freelance thing? I set the knife down, fighting the urge to drive it into the cutting board. I am a senior copywriter for a marketing firm. Dad, I have a salary. Benefits. A 401k. It's not a gig. He chuckled. A dry, rattling sound. Right. Creative work. Very unstable market. Though, I was reading an article just yesterday about AI replacing all those writing jobs. Must be stressful. Wondering if you'll have a paycheck next month. I have a contract, I said, my voice tight. I'm the only one here who actually moved out and bought my own furniture. Remember? I'm doing fine. For now, he said, returning to his paper. Mason, how's the portfolio looking? That merger go through? Smooth sailing, Dad, Mason said, finally looking up and flashing that perfect, white-toothed smile. We're looking at a 20% yield this quarter. That's my boy, my father beamed. Solid, reliable. That's what matters in the long run. Stability. The implication hung in the air. Heavy and suffocating. Mason was the rock. I was the sand. It didn't matter that Mason had needed a loan from them 2 years ago for a condo down payment he never paid back. A fact I knew only because I'd overheard them arguing about it one Christmas. In the official family narrative, Mason was a titan of industry, and I was a vagabond with a laptop. Brooklyn, the coffee, my mother barked. Lydia will be down any minute. Make a fresh pot. She likes hazelnut. I'm on it, I said. I ground the beans, the mechanical whir drowning out my father's murmuring. I needed to get out of this kitchen. I needed to look at that letter again. I waited until the coffee was brewing and my mother was distracted by the bacon grease popping. I'm going to run to the bathroom, I announced. Be quick, my mother said. We have to set the table for brunch. I walked out, past the dining room with its humiliating seating arrangement, and up the stairs. I slipped into my childhood bedroom and locked the door. My hands were trembling again. I went to the drawer, the one with the loose track. I pulled it out, reached behind, and peeled the tape back. The envelope was still there. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the statement. In the daylight, it looked even more official. Sterling and Hart Financial Services. I scanned the transaction history. October 4th, withdrawal, $6,000. October 15th, withdrawal, $4,000. November 1st, withdrawal, $2,400. My stomach churned. $12,400 gone in less than a month. And the account name, the Mitchell Family Legacy Trust. Brooklyn Marie Mitchell, beneficiary. I had never signed for a trust. I didn't even know my grandfather had left a trust. If this money was in my name, why was it being drained? And why was the statement coming here? I pulled out my phone. My fingers felt clumsy as I dialed Celeste. Celeste Rourke had been my best friend since college. She was a paralegal at a high-end firm in the city, the kind of person who organized her spice rack alphabetically and didn't suffer fools. She picked up on the second ring. Happy Turkey Day. Why are you calling me before noon? Did you kill them yet? I found something, I whispered. What? Like a body? Financial papers, I said. Hidden in my room. It's a statement for a trust account in my name, Celeste. There are withdrawals, big ones, but I don't have access to this account. The line went quiet. The joking tone vanished instantly. Read it to me. Exactly what it says. I read her the header, the account number, and the transaction dates. Okay, Celeste said, her voice sharp and professional. Listen to me very carefully. Brooklyn, do not confront them. Not yet. I want to scream at them, I said, clutching the paper. They're talking about me downstairs like I'm a financial disaster. Meanwhile, There's an account with my name on it that they're draining. That is exactly why you can't scream, Celeste said. If you confront them without the full picture, they will gaslight you. They will say it's a mistake, or it's for your own good, or you're crazy. They'll shred the evidence the second you turn your back. You are in the house, right? Yes. Document everything, she commanded. Photos of every page, front and back, check the dates. And Brooklyn? Act normal. If they sense you know, they might lock things down. You need to find out where that money is going. They removed my seat at the table. Celeste, I said, my voice breaking. They literally took my chair away. I know. Honey, I know they're monsters, she said softly. But right now, you have to be a spy. You are not the daughter anymore. You are the investigator. Put the mask on, get the proof, then we burn them down. Okay, I said. Okay, I can do that. Call me if you find anything else. And Brooklyn? Check your credit. Now. I hung up. I put the letter back, taped it securely, and fixed the drawer. I checked my face in the mirror. I looked pale, my eyes wide and frightened. I pinched my cheeks to bring some color back, put the mask on. I unlocked the door and went back downstairs. The kitchen was even louder now. Lydia had come down. She was wearing a silk robe and holding a mug of coffee, looking apologetic as she stood near the island. Morning. Brooklyn? She said. Morning, I said, forcing a smile. My mother was aggressively arranging bagels on a platter. I walked over to her. I needed to test the waters. I needed to see how thick the ice was. Mom, I said casually, leaning against the counter. Did anything come in the mail for me lately? I was expecting a renewal notice for a magazine, and I thought I might have forgotten to change the address. My mother froze. It was subtle, a hesitation in her hand as she reached for the cream cheese. But I saw it. She turned to me, and her face was a mask of sudden, irrational fury. Then she laughed, a high, brittle sound. Mail? She asked. For you? Why on earth would you get mail here? You haven't lived here in 15 years. Brooklyn. I know, I said, keeping my voice even. It was just a thought. Sometimes things get crossed. You are always digging, she snapped, slamming the cream cheese down. Always looking for something to pick at. A fight. A problem. Why can't you just enjoy the morning? Why do you have to make everything an interrogation? It was a yes or no question, I said. It's an accusation, she shouted. That's what it is. You come in here with your moodiness and your questions, trying to catch us in something. I work my fingers to the bone to make this holiday nice. And all you do is complain about chairs and mail. She brushed past me, shoulder-checking me hard enough to make me stumble. I'm going to the pantry, she announced to no one. The room went silent. Lydia looked horrified. Mason was studying his coffee cup with intense fascination. I stood there, my heart hammering. She's terrified. I realized that wasn't anger, that was defense. She knew exactly what mail I was talking about. Lydia cleared her throat. She took a step toward me. I'm sorry, she whispered. I looked at her. It's not your fault. Lydia, she's tense. No, I mean about the seat, Lydia said. Her voice low so Mason couldn't hear. And the room, I feel terrible. I told Mason I could sleep on the couch, or we could get a hotel. It's fine, I said. Really? Lydia hesitated, looking toward the pantry where my mother had disappeared. I didn't know you were coming. Until you walked in the door yesterday, I thought it was just us. I stared at her. What do you mean? Mason said you were working, she said, glancing at Mason, who was suddenly very busy washing a spoon in the sink. He said your parents told him you weren't going to make it this year, that you were too busy with your career. The air left my lungs. They hadn't just moved my seat. They had erased me. They had told the new girlfriend, the future of the family, that I simply wasn't going to be there. If I hadn't shown up, they would have had a lovely, peaceful Thanksgiving without me, and they would have told Lydia I was a workaholic who didn't care about family. I see, I said. Well, I guess plans changed. I'm glad you're here, Lydia said earnestly. I really am. Thanks, Lydia. My father walked in then, rubbing his hands together. All right, team, change of plans for tomorrow. The Hendersons canceled, so we don't have to do the big buffet. He looked around the room, his gaze sliding over me like I was a piece of furniture. We'll do a nice dinner tomorrow night, he said. At the club? Just immediate family. I already called and adjusted the reservation. That sounds nice, Lydia said. 7 o'clock, my father said. He looked at Mason. Wear a tie. Then he looked at me, directly at me. It will be easier, he said, his voice flat, without complications. The table at the club is small, 4 tops only. He smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. You understand. Brooklyn, you're heading back early anyway, right? To get back to that job. I hadn't said anything about leaving early. I had planned to stay until Sunday. Right, I said, my voice hollow. Back to the job. Perfect, he said. Problem solved. I turned and walked out of the kitchen. I couldn't breathe in there. The oxygen was being consumed by their lies. I grabbed my coat from the rack, my coat that was covering my exiled chair, and walked out the front door. Where are you going? Mason called after me. For a walk, I said, not looking back. I need air. I walked down the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. The cold air hit my face, shocking my system. I walked fast, my arms pumping, trying to burn off the rage that was building in my chest. They were kicking me out, not explicitly, but effectively. The table is small, 4 tops only. Mom, Dad, Mason, Lydia, no seat for Brooklyn, no seat for disappointments. I walked until I reached the edge of the property, where the manicured lawn gave way to the older, wooded lots of the neighbors. Brooklyn? Is that you? I stopped. An elderly woman was raking leaves in the yard next door. Mrs. Hallowell. She had lived there since I was a baby. She used to give me butterscotch candies when I scraped my knee. Hi, Mrs. Hallowell, I said, walking over to the low stone wall that separated our properties. I tried to smooth my expression. My goodness, look at you, she said, leaning on her rake. She was wrapped in a thick wool cardigan. I haven't seen you in ages. I thought you must have moved to Europe or something. Just the city, I said. Well, it's good you're here, she said. She looked toward my parents' house, her expression darkening slightly. Your poor mother. She's looked so frazzled lately. The holidays are stressful, I said automatically. Oh, it wasn't the holidays, dear, Mrs. Hallowell said, leaning in closer. It was after that meeting. Last month, I saw her coming back from the bank in town. She was sitting in her car in the driveway for an hour, just staring at the steering wheel, crying her eyes out. I went still. The bank? The one on Main Street, she said. I waved, but she didn't see me, and then your father came out and, well, they had quite a row right there in the yard, shouting about, oh, I shouldn't gossip. No, please, I said, my grip tightening on the cold stone. I'm worried about them. What were they shouting about? Mrs. Hallowell hesitated, then lowered her voice. I heard your father say something about fixing the liquidity, and your mother was screaming that it was too risky. I thought maybe the business was in trouble. Thanks, Mrs. Hallowell, I said. That's good to know. You take care of them, she said, patting my hand with her cold, papery fingers. They're getting older. I will, I said. I walked away, my mind racing, liquidity, risky, crying in the car. I pulled out my phone again. Celeste's voice echoed in my head. Check your credit, now. I had an app for that. I opened it. It usually logged me in with Face ID. I waited for the little wheel to spin. The dashboard loaded. My credit score was usually in the high 700s. I was careful. I paid my bills. The number on the screen was 620. I stopped walking. I felt the blood drain from my face. 620. I scrolled down, my thumb shaking so hard I almost dropped the phone. Recent inquiries. 4. New accounts. 2. There was a credit card opened 3 months ago. Balance? $15,000. There was a personal loan taken out 6 weeks ago. Amount? $20,000. And the inquiry? Sterling and Hart Financial. I sat down on a tree stump by the side of the road because my legs wouldn't hold me up anymore. It wasn't just the trust. They were using me. They were using my identity. The liquidity problem Mrs. Hallowell heard about? They were solving it with my credit score. They were drowning, and they were using my body as a raft. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just bad parenting. This was criminal. This was identity theft. This was grand larceny. And the worst part? The absolute worst part was the realization of why they had treated me like garbage all weekend. They weren't just mean. They were dehumanizing me to make it easier to steal from me. If I was the disappointment, the unstable one, the failure, then they didn't have to feel guilty about ruining my life. They could rationalize it. She would have wasted it anyway. We needed it more. I sat there for 10 minutes, breathing in the cold air, letting the shock harden into something cold and sharp. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the witness. I stood up. I walked back to the house. The driveway was empty. Mason's car was gone. My parents' car was gone. I checked the time. 11:30. They must have gone to pick up the wine for dinner. My mother had mentioned needing a specific vintage. The house was empty. I let myself in. The silence was heavy. I didn't go to the kitchen. I went straight to the office. I tried the handle. It turned. They had gotten careless. Or maybe they thought I was so beaten down, so cowed by their insults, that I wouldn't dare invade their sanctuary. I pushed the door open. The office smelled of old paper and my father's expensive cigars. I went to the desk. It was cluttered with papers. I started sifting, not blindly. I looked for the logo, the eagle wing. I found a stack of file folders on the side table, under a heavy brass paperweight. The top one was labeled in my father's distinct, blocky handwriting. Construction loans. The second one, tax liens. The third one, near the bottom of the stack, had a label that made my breath hitch. Brooklyn. Keep. I opened it. It wasn't just statements. It was the application forms. I flipped through them. Application for personal line of credit. Beneficiary authorization form. Power of attorney. There was a signature at the bottom of the power of attorney document. Brooklyn M. Mitchell. It looked like my signature. It had the same loop on the B, the same sharp slant on the M, but it was too perfect. It lacked the slight rush, the tiny inconsistencies of a real hand. It was a practiced imitation. I looked at the date. It was signed 3 months ago. I was in Chicago 3 months ago. I had never been in this room. My father had forged my signature. He had sat at this desk, practiced my name, and signed my life away. I heard the rumble of a car engine in the driveway. Panic spiked in my chest. They were back. I couldn't take the folder. If I took the whole thing, they would know immediately. They would know the office had been breached. I needed one thing, one undeniable piece of proof. I grabbed the beneficiary authorization form. It had my social security number, the forged signature, and the notary stamp, stamped by a friend of my father's, no doubt. I pulled the single sheet out of the metal prongs. I closed the folder. I put it back in the stack. Third from the bottom. I placed the paperweight back exactly where it had been, aligning it with the dust ring on the table. I heard the front door open. Brooklyn? My mother's voice, suspicious. Are you back? I shoved the document up under my sweater, pressing it against my stomach. The paper felt cold against my skin. I stepped out of the office and pulled the door shut until it clicked. I walked quickly toward the stairs, trying to look casual, trying to look like a daughter who had just come in from a walk, and not a woman carrying the evidence of her own family's betrayal against her ribs. In here, I called out from the bottom of the stairs. Just going to change. It's freezing out there. My mother appeared in the hallway, holding 2 bags of wine. She looked at me, her eyes scanning my face, my coat, my posture. "You look flushed," she said. "Windburn," I said. "I walked to the property line." "Well, hurry up," she said, turning away. "Aunt Denise is coming early. I need you to set out the napkins." "I'll be right down," I said. I climbed the stairs, feeling the crinkle of the paper against my skin with every step. I made it to my room and locked the door. I pulled the document out. I looked at the forgery one last time. It was a death sentence for their reputation. And it was my salvation. I hid it in the bottom of my suitcase, zipped inside the lining. Then I went to the mirror. I applied a fresh coat of red lipstick. I fixed my hair. I looked at my reflection. They wanted a performance? I would give them the performance of a lifetime. I would be the dutiful, slightly scatterbrained, disappointing daughter for exactly as long as I needed to be. And then, I would destroy them. I locked the bedroom door and wedged a heavy wooden chair under the handle, a paranoia taking root in me that felt both foreign and necessary. I sat on the floor, away from the windows, and pulled the stolen document out from under my sweater. The paper was still warm from my body heat. It was a beneficiary authorization form, a dense block of legalese that essentially granted power of attorney over the legacy trust to a third-party entity, Mitchell Consulting Group. I knew that name. It was my father's side business, a consulting firm he claimed to have shuttered 5 years ago when he retired to focus on golf and gardening. I looked at the bottom of the page. Signed, Brooklyn Marie Mitchell. I stared at the signature until the ink seemed to blur. To a stranger. It was me. It had the same oversized capital B, the same looping Y. But I knew my hand. I knew the way my pen dragged slightly on the upswing of the M. This signature was too fluid, too perfect. It didn't have the microscopic hesitation of a person thinking about what they were signing. It had the confident stroke of a person who had practiced it 100 times on scratch paper. My father hadn't just stolen from me. He had impersonated me. He had turned me into a silent partner in a failing business without my consent. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was Celeste. "I have someone on the line," Celeste said, her voice tight. "Anya Klein. She is a litigator. She is expensive. She is mean. And she is listening. You are on speaker." "Brooklyn," a new voice cut in. It was low, raspy, and devoid of warmth. Celeste gave me the broad strokes. "You are at the house?" "Yes," I said. "I found a document. They forged my signature to authorize a loan against a trust I didn't know I had." "Do not say a word to them," Anya commanded. "Do not scream. Do not throw the paper in their faces. Do not ask for an explanation." "But they are ruining my credit," I said, my voice rising. "They have stolen $12,000 already. I need to stop it. If you confront them now, without the full file, they will destroy the rest of the evidence," Anya said. Her tone was like a splash of ice water. "They will shred every paper in that office before you can dial 911. They will claim you signed it while drunk, or that you are mentally unstable and forgot. If they are already gaslighting you about a seating chart, Brooklyn, imagine what they will do when prison time is on the table." "Prison," I repeated. The word felt heavy in the quiet room. "Fraud over $10,000 is a felony," Anya said. "You need to decide right now, are you the dutiful daughter, or are you the plaintiff? Because you cannot be both." I looked at the forged signature. I thought about the missing chair. I thought about no seat for disappointments. "I am the plaintiff," I said. "Good," Anya said. "Then your job for the next 24 hours is to be an Oscar-winning actress. You need to lower the temperature in that house. Make them feel safe. Make them feel like you are the same pushover you have always been. If they relax, they will get sloppy. And you need to get back into that office and photograph everything. Not just one page. I need the timeline. I need the bank names. Can you do that?" "I can do it," I said. "Call me when you have the file," Anya said. "And Brooklyn? Watch your back. People do desperate things when the walls start closing in." The line went dead. I sat there for a long time, breathing through my nose. Then, I stood up. I folded the document and hid it inside the lining of my suitcase. Underneath the fabric shell where the zipper was broken, I went to the bathroom. I washed my face. I put on fresh makeup. I looked at myself in the mirror and practiced my smile. It looked brittle at first, but I softened the eyes. I relaxed the jaw. Be easy. I told myself, be the daughter they want. I went downstairs. The house was filled with the smell of roasting garlic and sage. My mother was in the living room, aggressively fluffing pillows. Mason and Lydia were on the patio, holding wine glasses. My father was nowhere to be seen, likely hiding in the garage or the office. "Mom," I said, walking into the living room. "The house looks beautiful, really. You outdid yourself with the autumn arrangement." My mother paused, a pillow clutched to her chest. She looked at me suspiciously, waiting for the sarcasm, waiting for the complaint about the seating. "Oh," she said, blinking. "Well, thank you. I thought the mums were a nice touch." "They're perfect," I said. "Do you need help with the napkins for tonight? Or I could start the glaze for the carrots?" Her shoulders dropped 2 inches. The tension that had been radiating off her in waves suddenly dissipated. "The napkins would be a help," she said. "I wanted to do the fan fold, but my arthritis is flaring up." "I'll handle it," I said. "Go sit down. You've been on your feet all day." I watched the relief wash over her face. It was sickening. She wasn't relieved that I was happy. She was relieved that I was compliant. She was relieved that the problem, me, had decided to stop being a problem so she could continue robbing me in peace. I spent the next 2 hours playing the role of the sentry. I folded napkins. I laughed at my father's jokes when he finally emerged from the office. I asked Lydia questions about her marketing job, nodding enthusiastically when she talked about social media metrics. "You know," my father said, clapping a hand on my shoulder as he poured me a glass of wine I didn't want. "It's good to see you like this. Brooklyn, relaxed, not so prickly." "I just wanted to have a nice weekend," I said, taking a sip. "You were right. Dad, I've been too stressed about work. I needed a reset." He exchanged a look with my mother, a look of triumph. "See?" the look said. "We handled her." "That's my girl," he said. After lunch, Mason signaled for me to follow him. He jerked his head toward the garage. "Help me grab the extra soda cases?" he asked loud enough for everyone to hear. I followed him out. The garage was cold, smelling of gasoline and fertilizer. Mason's pristine golf clubs were lined up against the wall. He didn't go for the soda. He leaned against his workbench and crossed his arms. "You're acting weird," he said. "I'm acting nice," I said, keeping my voice light. "Isn't that what everyone wanted?" "You're acting too nice," Mason said. "After the chair stunt yesterday, you usually would be sulking in your room for 3 days. What's going on?" I realized it wasn't worth the energy. I lied. "And I like Lydia. I don't want to ruin her first holiday." Mason looked at me, studying my face. Then he sighed, a long exhale of smoke that he wasn't actually smoking. He looked tired. "Look, Brooklyn," he said, lowering his voice. "Mom and Dad, they're under a lot of pressure right now." "So I hear," I said. "The business?" "The business, the market, everything," Mason said. He looked at his shoes. "They're trying to protect the family. You have to understand that. Everything they do to keep this ship afloat." "Protecting the family by locking office doors?" I asked softly. Mason winced. "I know about the loan situation." The air in the garage went still. "You know?" I asked. "I know they needed liquidity," Mason said. "Dad told me he had to move some assets around. He said he needed to use your name for some paperwork because my credit was already tied up with the condo and the new firm." "He used my name," I repeated. "Did he tell you he forged my signature?" Mason looked away. He picked up a wrench and turned it over in his hands. "He said it was a formality, Mason said. He said he'd pay it back before you even knew it happened. He's just in a tight spot. Brooklyn, it's temporary. It's a felony. Mason, I said. And it's $12,000? And a credit line? And a personal loan? It's not temporary. It's my life. Mason dropped the wrench. It clattered loudly on the concrete. Don't use that word, he hissed. Felony? You sound like a lawyer. Look, you have to take one for the team here, okay? Just let them fix it. If you blow this up now, the whole house of cards comes down. Dad goes under. The house gets seized. Is that what you want? I want my name off the debt, I said. They'll pay it back, Mason insisted. He took a step toward me, his face pleading. You can absorb the hit for a few months. Brooklyn, you're single, you rent, you don't have kids depending on you. I felt the words hit me like a physical slap. You don't have kids depending on you. There it was, the hierarchy of worth. Mason had a future. He had a potential wife, potential grandchildren, potential legacy. I had a cat and a rental agreement. In their eyes, my solvency was a resource to be harvested to protect the real family members. Depending on me, I said quietly. Is that how it works? Because I don't have children. My credit score is fair game? Because I'm not married. I don't need a financial future? I didn't say that. Mason backpedaled, looking panicked. I just meant, the stakes are lower for you. If Dad's credit crashes, he loses everything. If yours takes a dip, it's an inconvenience. You can rebuild. You're young. I am 33, I said. I am trying to buy a home. Mason, I am trying to build a life. Just wait, Mason said. Give them 6 months. Please, don't say anything this weekend. Let them get the refinancing through next week. If you speak up now, the bank freezes everything. I looked at my brother. I looked at the brother I had defended on playgrounds, the brother I had helped with homework, the brother I had loved, and I realized he wasn't protecting me. He was feeding me to the wolves to keep the wolves away from his own door. Grab the soda. Mason, I said. Mom is waiting. I turned and walked back into the house before he could see the tears that were threatening to spill. Not tears of sadness, tears of absolute, white-hot rage. The rest of the evening was a blur. We went to the club for dinner. I ate steak I didn't taste. I drank wine that tasted like vinegar. I smiled until my face ached. To family, my father toasted, raising his glass. To sticking together. To family, I echoed, and I drank. Visualizing the glass shattering in my hand, we got back to the house around 10. I went straight to my room, claiming exhaustion. I changed into pajamas, turned off the light, and sat in the dark. I waited. The house settled. I heard the creak of floorboards. I heard the shower running in the master suite. Around midnight, I heard voices. My parents' bedroom was down the hall from mine. They were arguing. It started as a low murmur, then escalated to the sharp hisses of people trying to scream in whispers. I grabbed my phone. I opened the voice memo app. I opened my door, moving inch by inch to avoid the squeaky hinge. I crept down the hallway, my bare feet silent on the runner rug. I stopped outside their door. Can't keep hiding the statements. Frank! My mother's voice, frantic. She asked about the mail today. She knows something. She doesn't know anything. My father's voice, dismissive and arrogant. She's fishing. She's always fishing for attention. Mason said she looked at him funny in the garage, my mother said. What if she checks her credit? What if she calls the bank? She won't, my father said. She's too weak. She's afraid of conflict. That's why the reset worked. We moved her chair. She pouted, and now she's folding napkins. She'll do whatever we tell her to do. I pressed record. The red waveform started dancing on my screen. But the audit, my mother said. Frank, if the bank audits the consulting firm and sees the transfer, if they see her signature. If it comes out, my father said, his voice dropping to a brutal, factual tone. It'll land on her. The account is in her name. The trust is in her name. I'm just the trustee. If the ship goes down, she's the captain. Frank, my mother whispered. She's our daughter. There was a silence, a long, heavy silence where I prayed, foolishly, that my mother would grow a spine, that she would say no, we cannot frame our child. She's strong, my mother said finally. She'll survive it. She can file for bankruptcy. It drops off in 7 years. It would kill us at our age. She has time to recover. Exactly, Pa, my father said. We gave her life. Martha, she can give us this. I stopped recording. I felt something inside me snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet, final sound of a tether breaking, the last thread of hope, the childish part of me that believed they loved me in their own twisted way, detached and floated away. They weren't just careless. They weren't just desperate. They were predators, and I was the prey. I crept back to my room. I didn't cry. I felt cold and clear, like I was made of glass. I sat on the bed, staring at the phone. She'll survive it. That was their justification. My resilience was their weapon against me. A soft knock on my door made me jump. I shoved the phone under my pillow. Who is it? It's Lydia. A whisper came through the wood. I hesitated, then unlocked the door. Lydia was standing there in a silk robe, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked like she had been crying. Can I come in? She asked. I stepped back. She slipped inside and I closed the door. I heard them, she said immediately. Her voice was shaking. I went to the kitchen to get water, and I heard them. Your parents. What did you hear? I asked. I heard your father say, It'll land on her, Lydia said, wrapping her arms around herself. And I heard your mother say you could file for bankruptcy. She looked at me, her eyes wide with horror. Brooklyn, what is going on? Mason told me you were having some financial trouble and they were trying to help you. He said that's why you were unstable, but that's not what I heard out there. No, I said, that is not what is happening. Lydia sat down on the edge of the bed. She looked sick. Mason proposed to me 3 weeks ago, she confessed. It was so rushed. We've only been dating for 6 months. He said he just knew. But tonight, I heard your dad mention the engagement. He said, at least Mason secured the Vance connection before the storm hits. My family was a parasite, and Lydia was the fresh host. Her family had money, real money, old money. Mason wasn't marrying for love. He was marrying for a lifeboat. Lydia, I said, sitting next to her, you need to listen to me. They are using my identity to cover a massive debt. They forged my signature. And I think they are planning to do something similar to you. Or at least use your family's money to bail themselves out. Lydia put her face in her hands. I thought I was crazy. I thought, God, they made you seem so difficult. But you're the only one acting normal. They manufacture the narrative they need, I said. If I'm crazy, no one believes me when I say they stole from me. If you're the perfect fiancé, no one asks why the wedding is rushed. Lydia looked up. There was steel in her eyes now. I'm not marrying him, she said. Not after tonight, but I'm scared. Brooklyn, we're in the middle of nowhere. We leave tomorrow, I said. But not before dinner. I have to finish this. I have to get the proof, or they will hunt me down for the rest of my life. How can I help? She asked. Just be normal, I said. Don't let Mason know you know. If he senses you're pulling away, he'll panic. Can you do that? I can try, she said. She stood up. I'm sorry. Brooklyn, I took your seat. It's just a chair. Lydia, I said. You can have it. I'm building my own table. She left, slipping back into the hallway like a ghost. I was alone again. It was 2 a.m. The house was dead silent. I knew I needed to get into the office. I needed the file, but the door was locked, and picking a lock was not a skill I possessed. Then I remembered the junk drawer in every house in America. There is a junk drawer in the kitchen. In the Mitchell house, it was to the left of the fridge. It held batteries, rubber bands, takeout menus, and keys. Keys to sheds that no longer existed, keys to suitcases long thrown away, and keys to interior doors. I put on my slippers. I went downstairs. The kitchen was illuminated only by the blue light of the microwave clock. I opened the drawer slowly. It squeaked. I froze. Nothing moved upstairs. I dug through the mess. I found the key ring. It was a rusty circle of metal holding 5 keys. One was a small, silver skeleton key, the kind that fit the standard interior locks of a colonial house built in the 90s. I grabbed it. I walked to the office. I inserted the key. I turned it. Click. The lock tumblers yielded. I slipped inside and closed the door. Not daring to turn on the overhead light, I used my phone's flashlight, keeping the beam pointed down. I went straight to the stack of folders. I found Brooklyn. Keep. I opened it. I started photographing. My hands were steady now. The fear had burned away, leaving only a cold precision. I photographed the loan application, the credit line approval, the bank statements showing transfers from the Legacy Trust to Mitchell Consulting. Then I found something else. It was a document at the back of the folder. It wasn't a bank form. It was a typed letter, drafted on my father's letterhead, but unsigned. Statement of clarification regarding the Mitchell Family Trust. I read it, the light from my phone illuminating the horror. It has come to our attention that our daughter, Brooklyn Mitchell, has, during a period of mental health struggles, misappropriated funds from the family trust. While we are heartbroken by her actions, we are taking steps to rectify the financial damage. We ask for privacy as we handle this internal family matter. They had written a press release. They had a contingency plan. If the bank investigated, if the IRS came calling, they were going to release this statement. They were going to claim I stole the money myself, while mentally unstable, and that they were the victims cleaning up my mess. They weren't just going to let me go bankrupt. They were going to frame me as an embezzler. I photographed the letter. I made sure the date on the computer footer, drafted, October 12th, was visible. This proved premeditation. This proved malice. I put everything back exactly as I found it. I locked the door. I put the key back in the junk drawer. I went back to my room and backed up the photos to the cloud. Then I emailed them to Celeste. Then I emailed them to a burner email account I had created years ago. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I was terrified. A primal part of me wanted to pack my bag and run out into the night, drive until the gas tank was empty. But I couldn't run. If I ran, they would release that statement. They would spin the story that I fled because I was guilty. They would win. I had to stay. I had to sit at that table tomorrow. I had to eat their turkey. I had to let them think they had succeeded. And then, when the room was full, when the audience was captive, I would speak. I closed my eyes. No seat for disappointments. My father had said, he was right. There was no seat for him at my table anymore. Thanksgiving afternoon descended on the Mitchell household like a heavy, velvet curtain. It was oppressive, stifling, and impeccably decorated. If you took a photograph of the living room at 2 p.m, it would have belonged on the cover of a lifestyle magazine. The fire was crackling with birch logs that my father had arranged just so. The scent of roasting turkey, sage stuffing, and caramelized onions drifted from the kitchen, rich and intoxicating. My mother was wearing a cream-colored cashmere sweater and pearls. Her hair coiffed into a helmet of perfection, moving through the rooms with a tray of crystal flutes. It was a glossy, high-definition lie. I stood by the window, holding a glass of sparkling water, watching the performance. My father was in his element. He was playing the role of the benevolent patriarch, the man who had built a kingdom and was now graciously allowing his subjects to enjoy it. He laughed loudly at his own jokes. He clapped Mason on the back. He topped off wine glasses before they were empty. It was the kind of aggressive charm that had always worked on outsiders. It was the charm that made teachers, neighbors, and distant relatives say, "Your father is such a wonderful man. Brooklyn, you're so lucky." It was the charm that made me question my own reality for 30 years. wondering if the cold, calculating man I saw in private was just a figment of my ungrateful imagination. But today, I saw the seams. I saw the way his eyes darted to the locked office door every time a floorboard creaked. I saw the way my mother's smile didn't reach her eyes, which remained hard and watchful, scanning the room for cracks in the facade. The doorbell rang, signaling the arrival of the audience. "I'll get it," my father boomed. Striding to the door, it was Aunt Denise and her daughter, my cousin Riley. Aunt Denise was my mother's younger sister, a woman who had spent her entire life trying to shrink herself to fit into the spaces my mother left behind. She wore a sensible gray dress and looked perpetually worried. Riley was 26, a graphic designer with a nose ring and a sharp wit that usually made these gatherings tolerable. "Happy Thanksgiving," my father announced, ushering them in. Come in, Denise. You look lovely. Riley, is that a new tattoo?" "Hi, Uncle Frank," Riley said, stepping inside and shaking off the cold. She spotted me across the room and gave me a genuine wave. "Hey, Brooke." "Hi, Riley," I said, forcing a smile. Aunt Denise hugged me, but it was a stiff, brittle embrace. She smelled of lavender and nervousness. She didn't look me in the eye. "Hello, Brooklyn," she murmured. "Good to see you." Then, her eyes flicked past me. She looked directly at the hallway leading to the home office. Her gaze lingered on the door. Her brow furrowed. Before she quickly looked away, it was a small moment, a micro-expression that lasted less than a second. But I caught it. Aunt Denise knew something. She looked at that office door the way you look at a bomb that hasn't gone off yet. "Denise!" my mother called out from the kitchen, her voice singing with artificial delight. "Come help me with the cranberry sauce, darling." Aunt Denise flinched. "Coming, Martha?" She hurried into the kitchen. I waited a beat, then drifted toward the hallway, pretending to admire a painting on the wall. I needed to know the scope of this. Was it just my parents and Mason? Or had the rot spread? I stood near the entrance to the dining room, just out of sight. The kitchen door was swung shut, but not latched. "You look pale," I heard my mother say. Her voice was low, stripped of its public sweetness. "I'm fine," Denise whispered. Is everything okay? With the situation?" "It's handled," my mother hissed. "Frank took care of the paperwork. You don't need to worry about the audit anymore." "I don't like it." "Martha," Denise said, her voice trembling. "If Brooklyn finds out—" "She won't," my mother snapped, "unless you give her a reason to look. Now listen to me. If Brooklyn starts anything today, if she makes a scene, if she starts asking questions about the business or the trust, you shut it down. You change the subject. We are not doing this in front of everyone. Do you understand?" "I understand," Denise said weakly. "Good. Here, take this tray." I stepped back quietly, my heart pounding a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. The audit. Aunt Denise wasn't just a bystander. She was involved. She knew about the trust. She knew about the forgery. They had compromised her too, probably using her fear of conflict to keep her silent. My parents had built a coalition of silence, and I was the target. I walked back to the living room, my hands shaking slightly. I found Riley sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her phone. "You okay?" Riley asked. Looking up, "You look like you've seen a ghost." "Just the usual family cheer," I said. Sitting down next to her, I needed an ally, but I couldn't risk exposing my hand yet. I had to be careful. "So," I said, keeping my voice casual, "how have you been? Hear anything interesting from the family lately?" Riley hesitated. She put her phone down, face up, on her knee. She looked at me with a strange expression, pity mixed with confusion. "Actually," Riley said, lowering her voice, "I wanted to ask you something. Is everything okay with you, financially?" I froze. "Why would you ask that?" Riley bit her lip. "I wasn't going to bring it up, but I got a weird text from Aunt Martha a few weeks ago. Like, 3 weeks ago. What did it say? I asked. Riley unlocked her phone. She scrolled back through her messages and handed it to me. I read the text from Aunt Martha. Hi, sweetie. Just a heads up. Brooklyn is going through a really rough patch with her mental health and some bad investments. She might reach out to you asking to borrow money. Please, for her own good. Do not lend her anything. We are handling it, but enabling her would only make it worse. Love you. I stared at the screen. The date was October 20th, 2 days before they forged my signature on the loan application. They had preemptively destroyed my credibility. They had planted the seed that I was unstable and desperate for money weeks before I even arrived. They knew that if I found out about the theft, I might try to tell people, so they made sure that no one would believe me. She's just desperate. She's just having an episode. I never asked anyone for money, I said quietly, handing the phone back. I know, Riley said. That's why it was weird. You've always been the responsible one. I mean, you're the only one of us who actually has a 401k. Yeah, I said. I am. I didn't answer her, Riley said. It felt gross. Is it true? Are you in trouble? No, I said. I'm not in trouble, Riley, but I think they are. Before Riley could ask what I meant, Mason clapped his hands from the archway. All right, everyone, he announced. Dinner is almost served. Let's get seated. The dreaded moment had arrived. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, as if I were wading through water. I walked into the dining room. The table was magnificent. The candles were lit, casting a warm golden glow over the china and silver. The centerpiece was a cornucopia of autumn abundance, and there were still only 5 chairs at the main table. My mother was directing traffic. Denise, you're here on the left. Riley, next to your mother. Lydia, you're next to Mason. Of course. Frank at the head. She paused. She looked at me. She didn't look malicious. She looked pitiable, like she was explaining something to a slow child. Brooklyn, she said, we set up a spot for you right here. She gestured to the corner of the room, near the sideboard. Mason stepped forward, dragging a small square table into view. It was a card table, covered with a tablecloth that didn't quite match the main one. It was set with a single-place setting. We figured this would be better, Mason said, offering a tight, apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. So it's less awkward. You'll have more elbow room. The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't just a separate table. It was a visual demotion. It was a children's table for a 33-year-old woman. It was a public declaration that I did not belong in the inner circle. Riley looked horrified. Aunt Denise was staring at her napkin. Lydia looked like she wanted to crawl out of her skin. Mason stood there, gripping the back of the folding chair, waiting for me to accept my punishment. He expected me to hang my head. He expected me to sit there and eat my turkey in exile, grateful for the scraps. I looked at the small table. Then I looked at Mason. It's fine, I said. My voice was clear. I didn't sound angry. I didn't sound hurt. I sounded indifferent. I'm fine, I repeated, smiling politely. Thank you for the extra elbow room. I walked over to the table, but I didn't sit. I stood behind the chair, my hands resting lightly on the back. I wasn't going to sit there like a naughty child. I wasn't going to let them see me lowered. Mason looked confused. He had expected a fight. My compliance threw him off balance. Okay, he said. Well, good. Wait, Lydia said. Her voice cut through the tension. She stood up from her seat at the main table, the seat that had been mine for 3 decades. This is ridiculous, Lydia said. Her voice shook, but she kept her chin up. We can fit another chair. There's plenty of room. She grabbed her own chair and scooted it to the left, creating a gap between her and Mason. Brooklyn should sit here, Lydia said, patting the empty space. We can squeeze in. We're family, right? It was a challenge. A direct public challenge to the narrative. Lydia was forcing them to choose. Acknowledge that their exclusion of me was arbitrary and cruel, or double down on their control in front of witnesses. My father didn't hesitate. No, no, he said, laughing jovially, though his eyes were cold shards of ice. We already arranged the seating. Lydia, it's all set. We don't want everyone bumping elbows. The table is too small for 7. It's an 8-person table. Frank, Lydia said, her politeness slipping. It's set for 6, my father corrected, his voice hardening. We like to have space. Brooklyn is fine. Look at her. She loves having her own space. She's very independent. He looked at me, daring me to contradict him, daring me to beg. I'm fine, really, I said, meeting his gaze. I wouldn't want to cause a complication. I used his word, complication. He blinked, recognizing the echo of his own insult from the kitchen earlier that day. Right, he said, clearing his throat. Well, let's sit. The food is getting cold. The guests sat. I remained standing at my exile post for a moment longer, watching them. They looked like a painting of a family, framed by the candlelight. I was the observer. I was the ghost. I finally sat down at the small card table. It wobbled slightly. Let's say grace, my mother announced. She reached out and took my father's hand. She took Aunt Denise's hand. The circle closed at the main table. I was not part of the chain. I folded my hands in my lap, alone. Dear Lord, my father began, bowing his head. We thank you for this bounty. We thank you for this home. We thank you for the family gathered here today. And, my mother added, her voice trembling with emotion, we are so thankful for second chances. She squeezed Mason's shoulder. I saw it. It was a firm, grounding squeeze. We are thankful that even through trials, family remains, she continued, and that we have the strength to protect what matters most. Protect what matters most, me excluded. Amen, my father said. Amen, the table murmured. Amen, I whispered to the empty air. The salad was served. My mother had made a pear and walnut salad with gorgonzola. She placed a bowl on my small table, smiling sweetly. There you go, sweetie. No walnuts for you. I remembered you don't like them. I love walnuts, I said. I'm allergic to pecans. Oh, she said, waving a hand. Well, same difference. She walked away. I looked at my phone, which I had placed face down on the tablecloth. It vibrated. A text message. I glanced at the screen, shielding it with my hand. It was from Anya Klein, the attorney. Update from my contact at the bank. The legacy account isn't a new creation. It's a revitalization of a dormant trust created by your maternal grandfather, Thomas Mercer. In 1998, you were the sole beneficiary. Set to vest at age 30, the trustee was listed as Martha Mitchell. It looks like the account was emptied 5 years ago, left with a nominal balance, and then reactivated 3 months ago to use as collateral for these new loans. They aren't just stealing from you now. They stole your inheritance years ago and are now using the empty shell of it to bury you in debt. I need the full trust documents to prove the breach of fiduciary duty. Get everything. I stared at the text. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Grandpa Thomas, my mother's father, he had died when I was 12. He was a stern, quiet man who had owned a chain of hardware stores. I remembered him giving me silver dollars. I didn't know he had left me a trust. Sole beneficiary, vesting at 30. I was 33. That money should have been mine 3 years ago. My mother had been the trustee. My mother, who was currently laughing at a story Aunt Denise was telling, had stolen my grandfather's legacy. She had emptied it 5 years ago, right around the time Mason bought his condo. Right around the time my parents renovated the kitchen. They had eaten my inheritance. They had worn it. They had lived in it. And now, they were using the corpse of that account to frame me for their own bankruptcy. I felt a coldness spread through my chest that was absolute and terrifying. It wasn't anger anymore. Anger is hot. Anger is reactive. This was grief, but it was a fast-forwarded grief. I was grieving the parents I thought I had. I was grieving the relationship I had tried so hard to save. I was grieving the little girl who used to sit at that big table and think she was loved. They were dead to me. They were sitting 10 feet away, passing the bread rolls. But they were dead. I needed the documents. I needed the audio. I needed to end this. I stood up. My chair scraped against the floor, a harsh sound in the polite hum of dinner conversation. "Excuse me," I said. My father looked up, a piece of lettuce on his fork. "Where are you going? We're about to carve the bird." "I left my phone charger upstairs," I said. "I'll be right back." "Hurry up," he said. "We aren't waiting." "I know," I said. "You never do." I walked out of the dining room. I walked through the hallway, past the locked office, past the kitchen where the dirty prep dishes were piled high. I climbed the stairs to my room. My movements were precise, mechanical. I went to my suitcase. I unzipped the lining. I pulled out the sheaf of papers I had photographed and stolen. I pulled out the folder with the forgery. I unlocked my phone. I checked the audio file from the hallway recording. Duration: 2 minutes and 14 seconds. It was queued up and ready. I checked the connection to the living room TV. We were on the same Wi-Fi network. The TV was a smart model, compatible with screen mirroring. I had tested it briefly while they were outside on the patio. It worked. I took a deep breath. I looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like a victim. I didn't look unstable. I looked like a woman who was about to burn the house down with the truth. I picked up the papers. I picked up my phone. I walked back downstairs. The dining room was louder now. The wine was flowing. My father was standing at the head of the table, sharpening the carving knife against the steel rod. Shing, shing, shing. He looked up as I entered. "Just in time," he said, grinning. I saved the drumstick for Mason. I didn't go back to the card table. I walked to the main table. I stood directly behind the empty chair, my chair, where Lydia was sitting. The room went quiet. The rhythmic shing of the knife stopped. "Brooklyn?" my mother said, her voice tight. "What are you doing? Your seat is over there." I looked at her. I looked at her pearls. I looked at her fearful, deceitful eyes. "I have something to read," I said. "We're eating," my father said, his voice dropping an octave. "Sit down. Brooklyn." "Mom had a reading," I said calmly, "about second chances. I have a reading too." I placed my stack of papers on the white tablecloth, right next to the gravy boat. "It's about the Mitchell Family Legacy Trust," I said. The color drained from my mother's face so fast it looked like a special effect. My father's grip tightened on the carving knife until his knuckles turned white. Aunt Denise dropped her fork. It hit the china plate with a loud clatter. "What are you talking about?" Mason asked, looking between me and our parents. "What trust?" "The one Grandpa Thomas left me," I said, my voice steady, projecting to the back of the room. "The one Mom was trustee of, the one that was emptied 5 years ago, and then reactivated last month to secure a fraudulent loan in my name." "That is enough," my father roared. He slammed the knife down on the platter. "You are drunk. You are making a scene. Go to your room." "I'm not drunk, Dad," I said. "And I'm not leaving." I looked at the guests. I looked at Riley, whose mouth was open. I looked at Lydia, who was staring at me with awe. "I found the papers," I said. "I found the forgery. I found the drafted press release where you blame me for your embezzlement." "She's lying!" my mother screamed. Standing up, she pointed a shaking finger at me. "She's sick. I told you, Denise. I told you she was having episodes." "I have the receipts," I said. I picked up my phone. I tapped the screen. In the living room, visible through the archway, the large television screen flickered to life. "Let's read them together," I said. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The glossy magazine cover had been ripped away, and everyone was staring at the rot underneath. I sat down at the wobbly card table, the metal legs scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that was sharp enough to make Aunt Denise flinch. I placed my phone face down on the tablecloth, right next to the bowl of pear salad I wasn't going to eat. "Everything okay?" my mother asked. her eyes darting to the phone and then back to my face. She was looking for a sign. Tears, anger, the telltale flush of the hysterical daughter she had built a career on managing. "Fine," I said. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a surgeon scrubbing in. "I just needed to check on something." "Well, let's eat before it gets cold," my father boomed, signaling the official start of the performance. The dinner began with a glossy, suffocating normalcy. It was a masterclass in denial. My father carved the turkey with the precision of a man who believed that if he sliced the meat thin enough, no one would notice he was bankrupt. He told stories about the country club, about his golf handicap, about the idiots in local government, the standard greatest hits of Frank Mitchell. The guests laughed on cue. Aunt Denise made polite noises of agreement. Mason added colorful details to the stories, playing the dutiful hype man. I sat in my corner, watching them. I felt like I was watching a play from the cheap seats, except I knew the theater was on fire. "This stuffing is incredible, Martha," Lydia said, her voice a little too loud, trying to fill the awkward gap of silence that radiated from my table. "It's an old family recipe," my mother said, beaming. "My mother used to make it, of course. She used chestnuts, but I find them too heavy." "Speaking of heavy," Aunt Denise said, taking a nervous sip of her wine. "Frank, did you ever get that situation sorted with the heavy equipment write-off for the audit?" The word hung in the air like a gunshot. Audit. The clinking of silverware stopped instantly. My father turned to Denise slowly. His smile didn't drop, but it froze into something reptilian. "We are not discussing business at the table, Denise," he said. His voice was low, devoid of the jovial warmth he had been projecting for the last hour. "It is Thanksgiving. I just meant," Denise stammered, her face flushing a deep, blotchy red. "I was worried about the timeline. I said we are not discussing it," my father cut in. The volume didn't rise, but the edge was razor sharp. "Eat your turkey." The room went dead silent. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was the terrified silence of a classroom after the teacher screams. Aunt Denise looked down at her plate, her hands trembling so hard her fork rattled against the china. I looked around the table, studying faces. I was building a map of complicity. Aunt Denise looked afraid. She knew enough to be scared, but not enough to stand up. Riley looked confused, her eyes darting between her mother and mine. Lydia looked sick, her gaze fixed on Mason, waiting for him to defend his aunt, to lighten the mood, to be the good guy she thought she was marrying. And Mason? Mason didn't look confused. He didn't look afraid. He looked annoyed. He shot a glare at Aunt Denise, a look of pure exasperation, as if she had forgotten her lines in the school play. "Dad's right," Mason said, smoothing his napkin. "Let's keep it light. Riley, tell us about that design project you posted on Instagram, the brewery branding." Mason wasn't just the golden child. I realized it with a jolt that settled in my stomach like a stone. He was the enforcer. He had been enlisted. He knew the ship was sinking, and his job was to keep the band playing while our parents threw me overboard to keep themselves afloat. My mother, sensing the fracture in the mood, decided it was time to deploy her favorite weapon, pity. She turned her gaze to me, her expression softening into a mask of maternal concern that I now recognized as predator camouflage. "Brooklyn, honey," she said, her voice pitching up to a sweet, sorrowful note. "You're so quiet over there. Are you feeling overwhelmed?" She let the word overwhelmed hang there, dripping with implication. "I'm just listening," I said. "Well, you know," she said, turning to the rest of the table but keeping me in her peripheral vision. "Brooklyn has always had a little trouble keeping things together in big groups. Remember her graduation party? She spent the whole time in the bathroom crying because her shoes were too tight." She laughed, a gentle, tinkling sound. "So sensitive. Always has been. We have to walk on eggshells sometimes, don't we, Frank?" "She feels things deeply," my father agreed. pouring himself more wine. It's a burden, really, for her, and for those around her. It was masterful. In 3 sentences, they had reframed my silence not as a reaction to their cruelty, but as a symptom of my own defect. They were seating the jury. If I exploded later, the guests would think, "Oh, poor Brooklyn. She's having one of her episodes." Martha was right. I saw Riley shift in her seat. She looked at me, then pulled her phone out of her pocket. She tapped something out, shielding the screen from her mother. My phone buzzed on the tablecloth. I picked it up. A text from Riley. "I shouldn't show you this, but you need to know what you're walking into." Attached was a screenshot. It was a group text thread named Thanksgiving Prep. The members were Mom, Dad, Mason, Aunt Denise, and Riley. I wasn't in it. I zoomed in on the messages from earlier that morning. Mom, just a warning. Brooklyn is in a mood. She's already starting drama about the seating chart. Dad, she's looking for a fight. Probably wants money. Mason, keep Lydia away from her if she starts crying. Mason, on it. She's such a disaster. Why did she even come? Mom, because she has nowhere else to go. She's desperate. Don't let her manipulate you. Riley, she's going to play the victim card hard. I lowered the phone. The air in the room felt thin, insufficient to fill my lungs. She's such a disaster. That was my brother. The brother I had helped move into his first apartment. The brother I had defended when Dad wanted to cut him off from the trust fund. The trust fund I now knew was never his to begin with. I looked at the empty seat at the main table, the gap where Lydia sat. I finally understood. The missing chair wasn't a prank. It wasn't a passive-aggressive nudge. It was a symbol. It was a physical manifestation of the story they had been telling behind my back for years. In their narrative, Brooklyn was the failure. Brooklyn was the instability. Brooklyn was the liability. And if you repeat a story often enough, it becomes the truth. It becomes a shield. If the financial crimes came to light, who would the police believe? The pillar of the community, Frank Mitchell? The devoted mother, Martha? The successful son, Mason? Or the unstable, desperate, sensitive daughter who had mismanaged her own trust fund and forged her father's signature in a fit of manic need? They had built a cage for me out of words, and they were waiting for me to walk into it and lock the door myself. Brooklyn? I looked up. Mason was staring at me. Mom asked you a question. I'm sorry, I said. I was distracted. What was the question? I asked if you were still seeing that. What was his name? My mother said, smiling. The musician? The one who borrowed your car and crashed it? That was 6 years ago. Mom, I said. And his name was David, and he didn't crash it. Someone rear-ended him. Right. She waved a hand. Details. I just worry about your choices. Sweetie, you always seem to attract chaos. Chaos, I repeated. It follows you, my father said, nodding sagely. Some people are just lightning rods for trouble. Or maybe, Lydia said, her voice cutting through the hum. Some people are just surrounded by storms they didn't create. The table went quiet again. Lydia was gripping her wine glass so hard, her knuckles were white. She wasn't looking at Mason. She was looking at me. A toast, my father announced loudly. Sensing the shift, he raised his glass, ignoring Lydia completely. To family loyalty, in this house, we protect our own. We stand together against the world. Because out there, it's cold. But in here, we have each other. Here, Mason said, raising his glass. To loyalty, my mother echoed. They drank. Why was Brooklyn's chair moved? Lydia asked. She didn't raise her glass. She put it down. The sound of the crystal hitting the table was small, but in the silence, it sounded like a gavel. Mason turned to her, his smile tight. Lydia, babe, we talked about this. It was just a space issue. It's not a space issue, Lydia said. Her voice shook, but she didn't look away. This table seats 8. There are 7 of us. You printed a seating chart that excluded your sister. Why? You're making drama, Mason said, his voice dropping to that patronizing, soothing tone he used on clients. Don't be like her. Lydia, don't make this a thing. Like her? Lydia repeated. You mean Brooklyn? The only person here who has been kind to me without looking like they're auditing my net worth? Lydia, my father barked. That is enough. You are a guest in this house. I am, Lydia said, and I'm watching you treat your daughter like she's the help. It's cruel. And frankly, it's weird. Why are you so afraid of her sitting at the table? My mother let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She dabbed at her mouth with her napkin. Afraid? She said. Oh, honey, you have no idea what you're talking about. We aren't afraid. We are exhausted. We have spent 30 years cleaning up Brooklyn's messes. We moved the seat because we wanted one meal. Just one, without having to manage her emotions. She turned to me. Her eyes were hard, black stones. And since we're putting everything on the table, my mother said, reaching into her pocket, I actually have something I need to read. I wasn't going to do this in front of everyone, but since Lydia insists on making this about cruelty, I think it's time for some transparency. She pulled out a white envelope. I recognized it. It wasn't the trust document. It was the prepared statement, the public indictment. She had brought it to the dinner table. She had planned this. She knew I would eventually crack, or that someone would ask, and she had the kill shot ready in her pocket. What is that? Aunt Denise whispered. It's a statement regarding financial boundaries, my mother said, unfolding the paper. Your father and I drafted this because we can no longer enable Brooklyn's behavior. We love her, but we cannot support her lifestyle anymore, and we certainly cannot cover for her mistakes. She cleared her throat. She looked at the guests, making eye contact with each of them, performing the role of the heartbroken mother forced to practice tough love. Brooklyn, she began, reading from the paper. We are writing this to formally notify you that effective immediately, we are severing all financial ties. She paused for effect. She wanted me to interrupt. She wanted me to scream, that's a lie, so she could point and say, see? Unstable. I didn't scream. I picked up my napkin. I wiped my mouth. I folded the napkin and placed it next to my plate. Let her finish, I said to Lydia, who looked ready to jump across the table. My mother smiled, a small, victorious twitch of her lips, and continued. Due to the discovery of irregularities in the family accounts which have been traced back to your personal access, we are willing to handle this privately, without involving the authorities, provided you agree to enter a treatment facility for... The room was frozen. Aunt Denise had her hand over her mouth. Riley was staring at the table. Mason was watching me, his eyes narrowing, waiting for the explosion. I let her say the words, treatment facility. I let that hang in the air for 3 seconds. Then, I reached for my phone. I didn't throw it. I didn't slam it. I placed it in the center of the card table. Screen down, with a soft thud. The sound was heavy, final, like a judge setting down a gavel after sentencing. Are you finished? I asked. My voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. It cut through the room like a scalpel. My mother stopped reading. She looked up, annoyed that her monologue had been interrupted. I am trying to help you, Brooklyn, she said. This is your chance to come clean, to get help. I have something to read, too. I said. I stood up. The chair legs didn't scrape this time. I lifted it back as I rose, silent and controlled. I picked up my phone. I walked toward the main table. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. The glossy magazine vibe evaporated, replaced by the static charge of an approaching storm. The guests sensed it. They sensed that whatever I was holding in my hand wasn't a defense. It was a weapon. My father stood up, his napkin falling to the floor. Sit down, Brooklyn. No, I said. I walked until I was standing directly behind the empty chair, my chair. Lydia had vacated earlier. I stood between my mother and my father, at the center of their carefully constructed stage. You read your story, I said to my mother. Now, I'm going to show you the receipts. I tapped my screen. The large television in the living room, visible through the wide archway behind my father, flickered from black to bright white. The air left the room. I stood at the head of the table, my shadow stretching long across the centerpiece of autumn squash and woven wheat. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen and the shallow, panicked breathing of my mother. I looked at them. I looked at the people who had raised me, the brother I had idolized, and the extended family who had watched me grow up. They were waiting for me to scream. They were waiting for the unstable daughter to throw a wine glass or burst into hysterical tears, confirming the narrative they had carefully planted in group chats and whispered conversations for weeks. I did not scream. I did not cry. I tapped my phone screen, my thumb hovering over the Cast to Device button. Then let's read the receipts together, I said. My voice was steady. It was low, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. The large flat-screen television in the living room, visible through the wide archway directly behind my father, flickered from its dormant black to a blinding white. The light spilled into the dining room, casting harsh, artificial shadows across the Thanksgiving feast. "What are you doing?" my father demanded, squinting against the glare. "Turn that off." "No," I said. I swiped to the first image. It was the beneficiary authorization form, blown up on the 60-inch screen. The document looked like an indictment. The legal jargon was dense, but the signature at the bottom was clear as day. Brooklyn Marie Mitchell. "This," I said, pointing to the screen without turning around, "is a loan authorization for a $20,000 line of credit, secured against the Mitchell Family Legacy Trust. It is dated October 22nd of this year." I looked at my father. "On October 22nd, I continued, I was in Chicago, presenting a marketing campaign to a client. I have the flight logs. I have the hotel receipts. I was 500 miles away from the desk where this document was signed." "It's a misunderstanding," my mother blurted out, her hands fluttering to her throat. We were handling paperwork for you. You know how you get with forms. We were helping." "Helping," I repeated. I swiped to the next image. The final notice from the bank appeared. The red letters seemed to pulse on the screen. "This was found in your trash can yesterday," I said. "It is addressed to me, but sent to this house, an address I haven't lived at in 15 years. It states that the trust account, which I didn't know existed until yesterday, is overdrawn. It also references a secondary credit line opened in my name 3 months ago." "Brooklyn, stop this," Mason said, standing up. He looked pale, his eyes darting between Lydia and the screen. "You're embarrassing yourself. We can talk about this in private." "We are past private," I said. "You made this public when you removed my seat from the table. You made it public when you told Aunt Denise I was unstable. You made it public when you told Riley I was desperate for money." I swiped again. This was the kill shot, the statement of clarification, the drafted press release on my father's letterhead, blaming me for embezzlement. "And this," I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the corners of the room. "This is what you planned to do if you got caught." I read the text aloud. Though I didn't need to, it was burned into my retinas. "It has come to our attention that our daughter, Brooklyn Mitchell, has, during a period of mental health struggles, misappropriated funds. We are taking steps to rectify the financial damage." I let the words hang there. "You weren't just stealing my money," I said. "You were planning to steal my name. You were going to frame me. You were going to tell the world I was a thief and a failure to cover up your own bankruptcy." My father exploded. It wasn't a slow build. It was an instant, volcanic eruption of rage. He didn't deny the documents. He didn't claim they were fake. He slammed his fist onto the table so hard the silverware jumped. "How dare you!" he roared. His face was a deep, violacious red. "How dare you come into my house, eat my food, and attack me, you vindictive little brat!" He pointed a shaking finger at me. "We gave you everything," he shouted. "We put clothes on your back. We paid for your college. And this is how you repay us? By snooping? By spying on your own parents? I paid for my own college, Dad, I said calmly. I am still paying the loans, and looking at the trust documents, I realize now that I shouldn't have had to. You are ungrateful, he screamed. You are twisting everything. You always do this. You take one little thing and you blow it up to destroy everyone around you. You are toxic. Brooklyn, that is why you have no husband. That is why you have no family. He was proving my point with every word. He didn't care about the facts. He didn't care about the forgery. He only cared that his authority had been challenged. He would rather burn my character to the ground than admit he had made a mistake. I am not the one destroying this family, I said. You are imagining things, my mother cried out, joining the fray. She stood up, knocking her chair back. You are sick, Brooklyn. We wrote that statement to protect you, in case you did something rash. We were trying to have a plan. To protect me, I said, by blaming me for a crime you committed? It's not a crime, my father bellowed. It's family business. It's my money. I made it. It all belongs to me. It was in my name, I said. Your name belongs to me, he shouted. I gave it to you. The room was spinning with his rage. Aunt Denise was crying silently. Riley was recording on her phone, her hands shaking under the table. Lydia was staring at Mason, waiting for him to step in, to stop the madness. Mason just stood there, looking at the floor, his jaw clenched. You think I'm making this up? I asked. You think I'm imagining the intent? I picked up my phone. I disconnected the screen share. The TV went black, leaving the room feeling suddenly darker. I have one more thing, I said. I tapped the audio file. I turned the volume all the way up. The sound of the hallway floorboards creaking filled the dining room. Then, the hushed, frantic whisper of my mother. Can't keep hiding the statements. Frank, she asked about the mail today. She knows something. Then my father's voice. Arrogant, dismissive. She doesn't know anything. She's fishing. She's always fishing for attention. The recording was clear. It was undeniable. If it comes out, it'll land on her. The account is in her name. The trust is in her name. I'm just the trustee. If the ship goes down, she's the captain. The silence that followed that line was heavier than anything I had ever felt. It was a physical weight. Then my mother's voice on the recording, soft and compliant. She's strong. She'll survive it. She can file for bankruptcy. It would kill us at our age. I stopped the recording. I looked at Aunt Denise. Her face was gray. I looked at Riley. She was wiping tears from her face. She'll survive it, I repeated, looking at my mother. My mother burst into tears. It was a sudden, theatrical collapse. She slumped against the table, burying her face in her hands. After everything we've done for you, she wailed. We loved you. We sacrificed for you. We were drowning. Brooklyn. We were going to lose the house. We were going to lose the club membership. What were we supposed to do? You could have asked, I said. Asked you? She spat, looking up, her face twisted with a mixture of grief and malice. You would have said no. You're so selfish with your money. You save every penny. We needed help, and you were just sitting there in the city, living your life, while we were struggling. So you stole it, I said. We borrowed it, she screamed. We are your parents. We have a right. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. It was the final death of the child inside me who still wanted their approval. Love is not a debt ledger, I said quietly, and a child is not an insurance policy. I looked at them, really looked at them. They were small. They were terrified of losing their status, their comfort, their club membership. They loved those things more than they loved me. They loved their facade more than my future. I am done, I said. I am done living in a family where love is conditional on how useful I am to you. I am done being the disappointment because I won't let you consume me. Mason stepped forward. He walked around the table, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Brooklyn, listen," he said. His voice was smooth, the voice of the deal-maker. "Let's turn the temperature down, okay? You've made your point. We hear you." "Do you?" I asked. "Yes," Mason said. "Look, Dad messed up. Mom messed up. They were desperate. But we can fix this. I can move some funds around. I can write you a check. Tonight, to cover the $12,000, and we can pay off the credit line over the next few months. We keep this in the house. We don't need lawyers. We don't need the police." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a checkbook. "How much?" he asked. "Name a number, for your pain and suffering. 20,000? 50? I looked at the checkbook. I looked at my brother. "You think this is about the money?" I asked. "It's always about money," Mason said, sounding exhausted. "Come on, Brooklyn, be realistic. If you report this, Dad goes to jail. Mom loses the house. I lose my reputation by association. Do you really want to be the one who destroys the family?" "Destroy the family," I repeated. "Yes," Mason said, his voice hardening. "Because that is what you are doing. You are holding a grenade, and if you pull the pin, you kill us all. Just take the money. Walk away. We'll never ask you for anything again." I looked at Lydia. She was standing up now, watching Mason with a look of absolute horror. I looked back at Mason. "I didn't destroy this family. Mason," I said. "I didn't forge the signatures. I didn't spend the trust fund. I didn't write the press release blaming my own daughter." I took a step back, creating space between us. "I didn't burn the house down," I said. "I only turned the lights on. If you don't like what you see, that is not my fault." "You're a bitch," Mason spat. The mask of the peacemaker slipped, revealing the same ugly entitlement that lived in my father. "You always were. You just wanted to see us suffer." The chair scrape was loud. Lydia pushed her chair back. She didn't look at Mason. She looked at me. "I'm sorry," Lydia said. Her voice was small, but clear. "I'm sorry I took your seat," she said, tears standing in her eyes. "I didn't know. I swear to God. Brooklyn, I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. Lydia turned to Mason. She took the engagement ring off her finger. It was a large diamond, probably bought with money that should have been in my trust fund. She placed it on the table next to the untouched turkey. "Lydia, don't," Mason said, panic entering his voice. "She's manipulating you. She's crazy. You know she's crazy." "She's the sanest person in this room," Lydia said. She grabbed her purse. She looked at my parents, who were staring at her with open mouths. "If your family needs a scapegoat," Lydia said, her voice trembling with rage, "it won't be me, and it won't be Brooklyn anymore." She walked out. We heard the front door open and slam shut, then the sound of an engine starting. Mason stared at the door. Then he turned to me, his eyes full of hate. "Are you happy now? You chased her off. You ruined my life." "You ruined it yourself," I said. "I knew," a voice whispered. We all turned. Aunt Denise was sitting at the table, her hands gripping the tablecloth. She wasn't looking at anyone. She was looking at the candle flickering in front of her. "Denise, shut up," my father growled. "No," Aunt Denise said. She looked up. Her face was wet with tears. "I knew. Brooklyn. I suspected it months ago. Your mother. She told me they were borrowing your credit. She made it sound harmless, but I knew it was wrong." I stared at my aunt, the woman who had knit me sweaters, the woman who had taught me to bake pies. "You knew?" I asked. "And you didn't tell me?" "I was afraid," Denise sobbed. "I was afraid of Frank. You know how he gets. I didn't want to cause trouble. I thought they would pay it back before you found out." "You chose comfort," I said. The realization hit me like a physical blow. You watched them drowning me. And you chose to stay dry. "I'm sorry," Denise wept. "I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix my credit score. Aunt Denise," I said. And it doesn't give me back the last 10 years of wondering why I wasn't good enough for this family. I turned to the table. I looked at the feast that was growing cold. The abundance, the wealth, all of it built on lies and theft. I am leaving now, I said. You can't leave, my mother shrieked. We have to fix this. We have to talk. My attorney, Anya Klein, will be in touch on Monday, I said. Do not call me. Do not text me. Do not come to my apartment. Brooklyn, please, my father said. His voice had changed. The rage was gone, replaced by a sudden, desperate wheedling. He sounded old. We can work something out. We're family. Blood is thicker than water. The full quote, I said, looking him in the eye, is the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. The bonds we choose are stronger than the ones we inherit. I picked up my phone from the table. I have already frozen my credit, I said. I have already filed a police report for identity theft. The digital copies of every document and this recording are already with my lawyer. You called the police? My mother whispered. She looked like she was going to faint. On your own father? I called the police on a man who stole my identity, I said. The fact that he shares my DNA is a tragedy, not a defense. I walked toward the hallway. If you walk out that door, Mason yelled after me, you are dead to us. Do you hear me? Don't come crawling back when you fail. I stopped at the doorway. I turned back one last time. I looked at the empty chair, the one Lydia had vacated, the one that used to be mine. I won't come back, I said. There is no seat for me here, and honestly, I'd rather stand. I walked out. I walked through the pristine hallway, past the locked office door that no longer held any secrets. I walked out the front door into the biting cold of the November night. The air smelled of wood smoke and freedom. I got into my car. I threw my bag in the passenger seat. I didn't look back at the house. I didn't look at the lighted windows where the people I used to call family were undoubtedly screaming at each other, tearing themselves apart now that their common enemy was gone. I started the engine. I put the car in drive. I drove down the winding driveway, past the manicured lawn, past the stone wall where Mrs. Hallowell had given me the clue that saved my life. I turned onto the highway. The road ahead was dark, but my headlights cut through it, steady and bright. I was 33 years old. I had $12,000 of fraudulent debt to fight. I had a family that wanted to destroy me. I had a long, messy legal battle ahead of me, but as I accelerated onto the on-ramp, watching the lights of Alder Cove fade in my rearview mirror, I realized something. My hands on the steering wheel weren't shaking anymore. My stomach didn't hurt. The crushing weight that had sat on my chest for as long as I could remember was gone. They had taken my seat. They had taken my money. They had tried to take my name, but they hadn't taken me. I turned up the radio. I drove south, toward the city, toward the life I had built, toward a table where I would never, ever have to beg for a seat again, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving, I was free. Thank you so much for listening to No Seat for Disappointments. I hope Brooklyn's journey of vindication resonated with you. It is a heavy story, but one that I felt needed to be told, because sometimes the hardest boundaries to set are the ones with the people who raised us. I would love to hear from you in the comments. Where are you listening from? Have you ever had to stand up to family to protect your own peace? Please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, karma, and taking back control. Share your thoughts in English below. I read every single one. Until next time, remember, you always deserve a seat at the table.